I think more and more of us have been exposed to senior horses and feeding, whether it's your own senior horse or somebody else in the barn has an older horse. And we really can break down old horses into four categories. We've got older horses that are healthy and active. And if I came to your farm, I would look at him and say, you know, he looks great. How old is he? Because it would be very hard for me to tell that he was older. He's got plenty of good teeth, and so he can really continue to eat anything. You can have these older horses that are very easy keepers. Well, that's just as long as he's got good teeth, that horse needs to be on a diet, just like any other easy keeper. Um, then we get into what is more typical of these older horses. You may have a horse that's a harder keeper, but as long as he still has good dentition, again, really what you'll find as we go through these older horse criteria, to me, when it comes to nutritionally senior, it's all about the teeth. If he's got good teeth, he can eat anything. If he can still eat hay, then he can eat any feed available. If he's thin, feed him a high fat, high fiber feed. But if he doesn't have great teeth, if he's got poor teeth, then that's where we need to employ senior feeds that are. He can't chew hay, so we need to put all that fiber into the bag, and he's going to be eating large quantities of it to get his fiber requirements. Oftentimes, these horses are also the ones that have metabolic issues. Maybe they've got Cushing's disease. We know that older horses decrease their insulin sensitivity, so they've got other special veterinary and dietary needs that most likely can all be met using a true senior feed. So, as I mentioned, my definition, the nutritional definition of a senior, really has no age attached to it. I have had 22-year-old horses that have barely any teeth, and they've had a hard life, and they need to be on a strict senior type diet that we're wetting. And then I've had 36-year-old ponies that are still bucking kids off and have plenty of teeth and eat a balance or pellet and hay, and they do just fine. So true nutritional senior horse has poor dentition, poor teeth, and they can't eat that normal food. They can't eat that hay and maintain their body condition. If you can't grind and eat that food, there's decreased fiber digestion, so there's going to be hindgut issues. Most of these older horses get loose manure or diarrhea, not digesting that fiber very well, decreased protein digestion, decreased phosphorus digestion. And we know that older horses, just in general, this isn't just if you have poor teeth, but older horses in general, post 20, decrease their insulin sensitivity. Now, they don't go into full-blown insulin resistance every single time, but we know that they are more likely to develop other metabolic issues because they decrease their insulin sensitivity. So when we design true senior feeds, we should be feeding lower carbohydrate feeds to older horses. What are some of the things that we need to do with these senior horses? Well, soak the feed because they have poor teeth and they really oftentimes need a mash that they can almost drink. So we can't feed them hay, so we're going to soak maybe a forage pellet, or we're going to feed a senior feed that is a true complete feed. And when I use that term correctly, it means you don't have to feed additional hay, so it's everything that the horse needs, including fiber right there in that feed. But you'll find that the feeding rate on a real senior feed is high. It's 10 to 15 pounds because we're looking at that horse getting 1 to 1.5% of his body weight in fiber. So we need to feed him a lot of fiber in that grain. Low sugars and starches, because as I mentioned, their insulin sensitivity is just decreased. So what are we putting in senior feeds? Well, we've got really good quality protein sources. We're going to use digestive aids like yeast culture because that's going to help break down fiber in the hindgut. And on top of that, we're using really high quality fiber sources, so soy hulls and beet pulp, things that are more digestible than your normal hay, maybe adding more bioavailable sources of phosphorus as well. So if we look at the senior low carb, the LMF senior low carb, we're listing the sugar and starch values on the tag because it's really important that if we're proclaiming a low carb feed that clients and customers can see those values. Ideal for horses that need that low carb product due to these metabolic issues. Can't chew hay. It can be fed as a complete feed or with hay. And it has glucosamine. It's a 13% protein, 8% fat, 10% non-structural carbohydrates. As I mentioned, there was research that showed that these older horses just decrease their insulin sensitivity. That was research done out of the University of Kentucky. If you need additional calories for additional weight gain, you can add additional oil if you need. This is a higher fat feed, so typically when you're feeding it as a complete feed, you wouldn't need to add additional oil, but it's also got 100% natural vitamin E, and it's a higher value than most other feeds. Vitamin E is an antioxidant. It helps with insulin sensitivity. It helps with immune function. Overall, it's really ideal for these older horses, and a lot of them are not on pasture. And where do horses get vitamin E? They get it from fresh green pasture, and just the majority of our horses aren't eating enough fresh green grass because we're managing them in stalls or smaller pastures, and they're not turned out 24/7. So the additional vitamin E is really critical in an older horse feed. But really, the crux of feeding any horse, whether you're weaning them, whether you're feeding a senior horse, whether you're feeding a performance horse or your backyard pleasure horse, is forage. It's the most important part of the horse's diet. The only reason that we feed anything else is to complement what we may or may not be getting out of forage. So what does that mean? So absolute bare minimum would be amount that you would have to feed your horse in forage hay would be 1% of their body weight in dry matter. Now, if you have a lot of pasture in the spring and the fall, we have those cool season grasses come on, and they're higher grasses, about 80% moisture. So to get that at minimum 1% of body weight in dry forage, the horse has to eat a considerable amount of pasture. So oftentimes when my clients say, I have plenty of pasture, my horses are getting everything, all of the calories and protein they need out of the pasture, we really have to have a good evaluation of, do you have 2 acres per horse, and does that 2 acres have about 75% coverage? Because if you have less than that, then chances are your horses aren't getting the amount of dry matter that they need. If I have a fat horse and I want to put it on a weight loss program, I will feed about 1.2% of their body weight in hay per day. That horse probably won't be grazing and consuming whatever they want. So we're looking at about, for that 1,000-pound horse, about 12 pounds of fiber per day. And that seems very limited, and it is. So I think I want to flip-flop the terms. An easy keeper, that is actually really a hard horse to feed. A hard keeper or a thin horse, that's pretty easy. You just keep feeding it. But the easy keeper is a really hard horse for us to manage, because we've now got to feed a restricted diet, but in a manner that is mimicking that grazing behavior. So we don't just trade one problem for another. We don't trade his obesity for gastric ulcers and stereotypical behavior because we didn't let him eat anything. Typically, though, I'm going to recommend that horses eat between 1.5 to 2.5% of their body weight when they're reliant on just hay. You're looking at that 15 to 25 pounds of hay per day. They're really not going to eat more than 30, 35 pounds, 3 to 3.5% of their body weight per day. They really max out at that much.